The Michael Opitz Show, carried on decidingthevote.com, has successfully completed our first year of Internet broadcasting, and I personally want to thank you for your support. We are part of the new grassroots media, covering news and discussion topics that are not found in the mainstream media. Internet broadcasting provides audio and video podcasts so you can watch and listen at a time convenient to you and then share with your other Internet connections. Our podcasts make full use of the electronic media in a way that can't be accomplished by cable networks, so you too can provide additional comments directly to me and to your associates. 2014 promises to be a very interesting year in our commitment to address issues with a rational and insightful response. During 2013, we interviewed Congressman Paul Brown, Georgia senatorial candidate, former Congressman Bob Barr, Georgia senatorial candidate Derek Grayson, Middle East expert and scholar Dr. Tim Furnish, and world traveler and author on global populations Frosty Woolbridge. Our occasional co-host, Dr. Christina Jeffrey, provided interesting commentary and insight on a variety of topics. Our multi-part interviews with Garland Favorito, founder of VoterGA.com, on the JFK assassination, with additional insight in a series of interviews with Judith Very Baker, Lee Oswald's girlfriend, brought additional revelations on the JFK assassination and details of her involvement of weaponizing cancer. Let's spend a couple of minutes to discuss our upcoming shows. The Fukushima nuclear tragedy in Japan and its impact on our Pacific seafood and the health of our nation will be explored in the January-February timeframe. We must seriously discuss the Fukushima tragedy impact on nuclear energy and the viability of alternative energy resources. We will be discussing with Dalton Mayor David Pennington his vision of Georgia as he seeks to become Georgia's next governor. We will also explore how we can significantly increase jobs in America and bring back manufacturing. We seek to keep the Michael Opitz Show interesting and fact-based so you will come away informed and engaged. Please go to www.decidingthevote.com and join us on our journey as we next review highlights from our 2013 shows. Why did you run for Congress and now the U.S. Senate?
Well, let me start with why I'm running for the U.S. Senate. One U.S. Senator standing firm on principle has a greater wherewithal to affect policy and to affect how legislation is handled in Congress. I am an original intent constitutionalist. I'm a U.S. Marine. I believe in liberty. I believe in the foundational principles that made this country great. Both parties are destroying those, and I ran for Congress to try to reestablish limited government as our founding fathers meant it. Because if we don't, this country is going to be totally socialistic, and we're going to see happen in this country the same thing that's happened in every socialist nation across the world from a historical perspective. You just have to look offshore at Cuba, at the change from actually a dictator, Batista, to Castro. Even during a dictatorship like Batista back in the 50s and 60s, Cuba was a very rich nation, flourishing. It was a vacation spot for the world. And then Batista was overthrown by Castro. Castro established a communist government down there. And now everybody's poor except for a few politically elite and a few very rich people. So what socialism, whether it's communism or fascism, just guarantees equal poverty for everybody.
Our guest today is former Georgia Congressman Bob Barr and successful attorney.
Bob is also recognized as a constitutional attorney, and he led the successful impeachment of former President Bill Clinton. Congressman Barr, we appreciate your taking time out of your busy schedule to have this extended conversation on your views as you seek to become the next congressman representing Georgia's 11th district.
Thank you, Michael.
Congressman Barr, tell us about your political philosophy and guiding principles, and as a second part to that question, why are you running again for Congress?
Well, the answer to both questions is the Constitution. The Constitution underlies my views on politics generally, my views on public policy and public service, and it is the reason that I'm running to return to the Congress from the 11th District of Georgia. To me, the Constitution of the United States of America is the most magnificent document ever written by the hand of man. As Thomas Jefferson declared many years ago, it truly is the very best document that personifies or that lays out a structure for what government should be, and that is simply a means, a mechanism to ensure liberty. It's not a mechanism to take power from the people, although that's what it has become by the way it's been used by generations now of political leaders in Washington and at the state level and even at the local level. But if we adhere to the Constitution, we would have a system of government in this country that maximizes individual liberty and minimizes government power. And to me, that ought to be the guiding philosophy or the roadmap, as it were, for governance, to maximize individual liberty and minimize government power.
Can you handle the truth?
Welcome to the Michael Opitz Show. Today we have with us candidate for the U.S. Senate, Derek Grayson. And Derek is running for Saxby Chambliss vacating Senate seat. Derek, how's the campaign going?
From my perspective, it's going quite well.
Wonderful. Derek, I've got some questions to ask, and I know you're anxious to share your point of view with not only this audience, but the people throughout Georgia. Jobs is so very important to all of us, and manufacturing is the foundation for the middle class, which is essential to social and political stability, and most importantly, to the wealth of our country. Without manufacturing, we have a shrinking tax base and a greater gap between the upper and lower economic classes. And we've seen a mass exodus of manufacturing jobs from the United States to China and third world countries. Why has this happened?
Government, and I know that's a very simplistic answer. Our government engages in policies that have allowed businesses, particularly large corporations, to still make a profit and bypass excessive regulations in this country by exporting jobs overseas. If we want that to change, government is going to have to change their policies. Now, where I would start, first thing I would do is propose legislation to get rid of all tax breaks for corporations, all businesses. Kaput, gone. Government does not create jobs. The American people, they are the ones who create jobs for America. When we wipe out those tax breaks and then approach businesses from this perspective, we say, if you want a tax break, hire Americans first. You will see those jobs start to come back. Government simply needs to get out of the way, and nobody has been willing on either side of the aisle to take a stance. We have corporations like Apple that can avoid taxes by offshoring their revenues. We have companies like General Motors that the American taxpayer bailed out under the guise of saving American jobs. And as soon as they were bailed out, what was a couple of the first things that they did? Shut down manufacturing plants, source those jobs overseas, and close hundreds of dealerships here in America. Those were American jobs. If you call Cisco's technical support, you get somebody over in India. Those used to be American jobs. I have a problem with that. We ought to be rewarding companies that put Americans to work.
Always introduce PhD Tim Furnish, an expert in Middle East affairs. And Tim, please inform the listeners about your background and experience.
Oh, well, thanks, Michael. I am a PhD in Middle East, Islamic, African world history, and I served in the military for some time, and then I've been as a college professor for a bit. And as I tell people, forgive me, Christina, I'm a recovering college professor, and she probably knows why I say that, because there are about 6 of us, as you pointed out, Michael, in the entire United States that are conservative. Well, 5 now that I've left. And I have been working for the last 4 or 5 years as a consultant to the military and in some wises to the intelligence community on issues having to do with Islamic terrorism, various Islamic ideologies. So I wanted to weigh in here and add on to some of what you guys have been talking about Syria.
Please do.
Well, 3 major points, and some of them you've touched on, but I kind of want to elaborate and throw one more in. The key thing is, as you've already broached, the idea that we are certain that the regime, the al-Assad regime, used chemical weapons. That is by no means certain. There are reports from Russian intelligence and other places, including some contacts I have, one in Syria and one in a neighboring country. There's indications that it's very possible that some of the opposition groups used chemical weapons, either obtained through pilfered government stores or perhaps even supplied by Saudi Arabia. Again, this is it's conjecture about where they come from, but there is some evidence, if not proof, that the opposition, some of the opposition groups have actually used them. So it's by no means certain.
Your comments on this are very important, because I haven't heard in the media anywhere that some of these chemical weapons could have come from Saudi Arabia, our supposed ally. So please continue.
Yes, it's possible. I think it's more likely that they got them from one of the pilfered government inventories, but no one knows for sure. But the point remains, Kerry is just frankly, I'll just use Putin's language. Kerry is frankly lying when he says he knows for sure that we know for sure that the government of Syria did this. We do not. Secondly, in sort of an ancillary point is, and you guys have touched on this again a little bit, the whole issue of chemical weapons. I would submit that a lot of the revulsion at chemical weapons and sort of the knee-jerk response to it is emotional. Chemical weapons are horrible. I mean, of course, don't know this by personal experience, thank God. From what I've read about it as a historian and from what I learned about it when I was in the military, one of the things we had to do in the military was once a year go into a gas chamber and take off our masks. Thank God it was just tear gas, but that was bad enough. I can't imagine something even more horrible than that, of course. So gas is very, very, I think, revolting issue to people, but I think a lot of it's emotional. And as you were starting to talk about there toward the end, how do you define a weapon of mass destruction? Well, in a sense, a gas is, because you can kill more people quickly. But is it more horrific? And Christine, I believe you brought up abortion. Is it? I would think that a good analogy for the Middle East is decapitation. Islamic rubrics on beheading are employed by a lot of the opposition groups, and we have videos of some of the opposition groups beheading people, particularly Christians. Is it worse if you kill 100 people with a poison gas shell, or if you just chop the heads off of 5 or 6 or 8 people at a time? I guess under international law, the latter is, or the former is probably worse, but I think they're both equally revolting. So the international community has long ago decided, most of the international community has long ago decided that gas is, quote unquote, a war crime. But there have been instances in modern history where gas has been employed, and I note that Nancy Pelosi was making a statement the other day about how we need to go after the Syrian government because they used gas, and the use of gas automatically means that something should be done. Well, she didn't have that feeling when Saddam Hussein was gassing thousands of Kurds in northern Iraq.
I remember that.
She still voted against George Bush doing anything about that. So things have changed, haven't they? All right, so that's the second issue. The third big issue I want to bring up, which really I don't think you guys got to touch on, is sort of the nature of the Syrian regime and the sort of sectarian and the breakdown of the various groups in Syria, and I don't have time to go into all of this, obviously, but just briefly. Hafiz al-Assad is a member of basically what is a heretical offshoot of Islam called Alawi. They're called Alawis. The Alawis purport to be 12er Shia, like the Shia of Iran and Iraq, but in reality, if you deconstruct their beliefs and their teachings, which I've done in a number of articles, they really are apostate Muslims, and they have a lot of practices that aren't even Islamic at all. When
you say apostate Muslims, would you explain to the listeners what you mean by that?
Yes, Muslims that are considered by mainstream Sunni Muslims to not be Muslims at all. Their beliefs are so outside the pale that they are not even deemed to be even a subsect of Islam. They're deemed to be a foreign religion. And in fact, sort of the godfather of modern Islamic fundamentalism, a guy named Ibn Taymiyyah, who lived in the 14th century, issued several fatwas, religious rulings against them way back in the in 14th century, calling them worse than Jews and Christians because they pretend to be Muslims, but they really aren't. And people these Alawis, they are people whose lives and property can be taken at any time because, again, they are just deemed so outside the pale. Now, these sorts of fatwas have been resurrected in the Syrian civil war, and a number of the most prominent Islamist groups opposed to al-Assad, like Jabhat al-Nusra in particular, have basically reiterated these and basically said, if we take over, we're going to kill as many of these Alawis as we can. The Alawis make up about 10% of Syria's population, so several million. In addition to this, the Alawi government basically is protecting the Christians. About another 10% or so of the population of Syria is Christian, Orthodox, Eastern Catholic, Melkite, a few other sects. And many, many, many of these Christians, probably most of them, have supported Bashar al-Assad and his father Hafiz, who died in 2000 but took over in 1970, because they were a bulwark against and have been a bulwark against the Muslim Brotherhood, Salafi, Islamic fundamentalist attempted takeovers of Syria. So basically we find ourselves in this curious position, which I guess I probably shouldn't use the term curious since Obama's been doing it for 5 years, this position where the government of the United States is basically supporting Islamic fundamentalist Sunnis in various places. I mean, he did this in Syria. He supported the Muslim Brotherhood over against first Hosni Mubarak, and still, to a large extent, is supporting the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt over against the people that deposed them, primarily the military.
We'll just hit some of the highlights, but everything here is a highlight. So anyway, Frosty possesses a unique view of the world, cultures, and families in that he has bicycled around the globe 100,000 miles.
Thank you, Michael and Christina. It's really a pleasure to join you and to join this conversation. And as you can imagine, I'm a person who takes action. I don't watch TV. I don't have time for it. I really work 60, 65 hours a week, usually September through May, and then I take off on adventures. And those adventures actually give me more insight into the human situation, not only here in America, but all over the world. And I have seen sites that most folks only see on the Nature Channel. I've seen sites and I've seen people and I've seen cultures in great detail, not just flying in and staying at the Taj Mahal, but actually riding at 12 miles an hour across the entire Asian continent, around the entire of Australia, actually 9 times across the USA, coast to coast and border to border, the entire length of South America. You name it, I've done it. And even what I have seen in the world and what I see coming to America, I am probably, you could call me a dissident professor or an outlier. Galileo was an outlier. Susan B. Anthony was an outlier. Even Dr. Martin Luther King was an outlier. They put their lives on the line to bring the facts, the figures, and the realities to this civilization in order to better it, to advance it, to promote it toward a more peaceful and hopefully more fairer future. And right now, with all of my writing, and certainly that last book, America on the brink, the next added 100 million Americans. Few Americans understand exactly where we're going, and I'm hoping to be one of those outlier or dissident professor voices that really alerts the American people. And I'm trying to get on 60 Minutes. I'm trying to get on Charlie Rose. I'm trying to get on Matt Lauer and all of the top shows, because we are, as a civilization and as a country and as a culture and as a language, we're in a great deal of trouble if we continue this massive and endless immigration into our country.
We are back with Judith Very Baker, and we're discussing the clinic in New Orleans, and also her book, Me and Lee, as it ties back to Lee Oswald. But Judith, you were associated with Dr. Oxner, who was affiliated in cancer research, who was affiliated with Tulane University. And he, so people won't think that he's a back alley scientist. He is a world class, and he was world famous.
Absolutely. I mean, he was the surgeon and doctor for presidents of state, like heads of state, like Perón and Somoza. He would fly down and secretly treat them. Then, of course, he told the CIA all about it. He's famous, not only locally, but internationally. He was once the president of the American Cancer Society. And I could go on and on about his various credentials.
And
so he was a very famous man.
You have many pictures of Dr. Osner in your book. I'm looking at page 13 here.
Yes.
That talks about the death of the smoker.
Right. He, along with the other two doctors, they were all interested in smoking and cancer. So when I'm invited to work with Dr. Mary Sherman, also an eminent, she was an expert. And in fact, when she died, it says woman expert in cancer slain, in New Orleans.
And she worked for Dr. Oshner, is that correct?
Exactly
what was
so.
Her title?
Well, she was an orthopedic surgeon who was interested in trying to help crippled kids with polio, you see. Had to help fix their bones and all. She was an expert in bone cancer, and her papers are still being quoted today. So imagine how I felt that I'm going to be invited. Now this is after 2 years of work elsewhere, St. Francis College. Then I went to University of Florida, and that was through the auspices of Senator Smathers. Smathers is a friend of Nixon and of Kennedy, and here he's sponsoring me, and these people are all really working very closely together. The cancer epidemic, I believe, that we're facing today largely has been caused by the introduction of the SV40 monkey virus in its varied forms, mutated forms, so many that we can't keep track of them, because it lays latent in your system. You don't know what's going to happen unless your immune system is compromised to such an extent that the virus can take hold.
It's interesting on these DRE machines, electronic voting machines that many states have been using, that they are inherently open to election fraud, because many of them do not have hard copies. Ballots that then can be used for recounts. And if you can't do a recount, then you have to assume that there is fraud involved in the election. And a couple of countries that have made a major decision on this, both Germany and Ireland, have thrown out the electronic voting machines just for that reason. So, Christina, do you have any thoughts on electronic voting machines and the security of our votes?
I've been interested in this a long time, and I recall, I'm not sure, did we buy our used voting machines from Alabama in 2000? 4, 5, or 6. I think it was 2005.
We didn't buy any, as far as I know.
Oh, yeah, you're Georgia.
Machines.
I'm South Carolina. South Carolina bought them used from Alabama. It was about 2005, and I was I was a little concerned about electronic voting, and I happened to run into the salesman at the airport. Spartanburg.
Tell us about that conversation.
Well, I was waiting for a plane, and these people I was waiting to meet a plane. No, I guess I must have been waiting for a plane too. And these people were all salesmen. They had just made a big sale to South Carolina. They were celebrating. They had a few, and they were in very good mood. And I saw this as a chance to find out something about the voting machines, since they were obviously in a very unguarded condition. And we just chatted for a while, and then, their plane was coming. They all got up at once to leave, and I said, just kind of a throwaway line, "So tell me something. Are those voting machines secure?" And the 3 men and the 1 woman started laughing their heads off as they walked out the door.